Welcome back to another edition of Federalist Radio Hour. I'm Chris Bedford, Senior Editor at the Federalist, and joining me today is Daniel Turner, Executive Director of Power of the Future, an organization that fights for workers and American access to energy, workers in the energy field, and their rights to have a job and continue to exist in America, something that's apparently extremely questioned these days. Thanks for joining me, Turner.
It is great to be back on the Federalist podcast. I think this is my third time, so I feel lucky.
You're a good guest. And you bring a lot of interesting expertise, especially right now. You just wrote a piece for us that was published at the Federalist on Thursday about the situation in Texas, because we've been hearing a lot of different news out of Texas. We've been hearing that, Senator Ted Cruz is in Mexico, which is a horrible place to go. We've been hearing from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez that this is proof that not following the Green New Deal is going to destroy your state and kill everyone. But more so from the ground, from our staff on the ground, we have two reporters there. We've been hearing tales of real woe. People who aren't ever used to this kind of weather in Texas. It doesn't hit. People who don't have shovels. People who don't have salt, which is most of the people. Largely a state that doesn't really have plows. And they've been stuck inside since Sunday. We've heard some horror stories about people with 4-day-old babies who have not been able to have water or heat for days at periods of time. This is a dangerous situation. And there was an obvious failing of the Texas energy grid, which was not really built for this sort of thing. Now, I just drove through Texas, all the way down through Lubbock, down to Texarkana, down to Lubbock, down to Austin, and then back up north to Dallas, and then out over to Arkansas. And I saw a lot of windmills, for example, especially in West Texas. I saw a lot of green energy. I mean, Texas doesn't quite live up to the hype of just the Dallas of old, where everyone just wears a giant 10-gallon hat and has lots of oil in their backyard. So, Daniel, explain to us what you talked to us about in this piece, which is what first is going wrong in Texas? What is the problem? Why are people unable right now to get energy to turn their lights on? What's going on in Texas?
Bad politics, bad policies. And, I mentioned this to you when we were talking earlier. Energy isn't always sexy, right? It's not fun. It's not titillating. Energy it's physics, it's math, it's the things that quite frankly I was pretty bad at school, but it needs to follow these basic laws. And you take a state like Texas, and I'm not going to throw one individual person under the bus. I'm going to name some names, right? But I'm not going to say that person did this. And that's what everyone's looking for, right? Everyone wants to be able to say it's because of you that this all happened, and that's just not possible. There are multiple factors that added up together caused what is happening right now in Texas. But here's one of them, right? Texas's energy grid was mandated in 2005 by Rick Perry, Republican Rick Perry, energy man Rick Perry, and he was a great energy secretary. And I would even say he's a champion of the fossil fuel industry. But in 2005, as governor, he signed into law a mandate that 25% of Texas's energy had to come from wind power. Before we even, why? I see your face.
Why would you do that?
Why?
I know it's windy in West Texas. The wind never stops blowing, but it's expensive.
Why would a politician mandate anything unless they truly believed that this was better for you? And so Rick Perry, Republican Rick Perry, energy advocate Rick Perry, somewhere in his mind got the teensiest notion that they convinced him wind power is better for us. And he's okay, so a certain percentage. But why does government feel that they have to what's working, right? The grid was working. And I mentioned this in the Federalist piece. Proof of this is not comparing us to another country or comparing it to California. Compare Texas to Texas, right? I keep seeing smart people, really smart people say, this is a once-in-a-lifetime storm. No, it's not. This happened in 2011. The exact same storm, just as bad. What was the difference in 2011? They didn't have this stupid mandate, right? 6% of their electric grid was wind. Now it's 25% because of this law. Well, when wind turbines stop turning, and it's only 6% of the electric grid, it's 6% of the problem. When it's 25% of the electric grid, it's a big problem. NBC News had this article, I mentioned it in the Federalist piece that, thank you, by the way, for running it, where they said just a small slice of the grid is made up of renewables. 25% is a small slice, right? 25% is a big, hefty chunk. And so, again, were the wind turbines to blame? In part, yes. Fossil fuels, did they live up to it? No, neither did nuclear. There were lots of things that were to blame. But the biggest underlying delta of what happened in the past as opposed to what happened now is this mandate, this on-high government knows better. We are going to tell you this is what percentage of the electric grid has to come from. Why does government feel they have to do this to us?
So Texas is a pretty diverse energy grid in that there is nuclear involved, there is coal, there is natural gas, there is wind. Is there any particular failing of wind that puts it separate? And also, what the hell went wrong with nuclear? I mean, nuclear shouldn't stop when it gets cold or in a snowstorm. It's not like they need to get new nuclear fuel rods delivered to them every week. It seems like it's pretty rare. I feel like at least that kind of energy should go forever, but what's going on here?
That's a problem of a transmission, right? That is a problem of freezing rain pulling down power lines. That is a problem of freezing rain that hurts in just electricity generation, right? So of course there are some black swan events. This is not a common occurrence in Texas, and I've been in Alaska where it's negative 25 degrees. Their electric grid is prepared for that. Texas's isn't. So yeah, there are some underlying geographical anomalies that they say Texas is not accustomed to this and wasn't prepared for it. But the biggest delta, the biggest combination of factors that why did it survive in 2011? Why did Texas have problems? They were like, oh boy, it's really cold. But why did they not have the death toll that they have now? And the delta is 100% wind energy. And I've had people online who are, there's always a question of, do you talk to the trolls? Do you listen to them? Do you read their comments? I kind of like to embrace their hate because I feel like it makes me a stronger person, right? But there's
a lot of hate on Twitter. We've seen that, especially since Rush Limbaugh, rest in peace, left us this week. There's so much hate out there. So what are the trolls telling you?
Yeah, and so much hate and so much stupidity. And so this idea, well, it wasn't the wind turbines. Okay, but more than half of them were frozen. Doesn't matter. Well, if it doesn't matter if they're frozen, then what does it matter if they're unfrozen, right? If inactivity is not a problem, then how is activity a benefit? The response to that, you're a bald, you're an idiot. Okay, well, then there you go. There's your response, right? But that's just a logical question. If you are telling me wind is not the problem, however, 60% of the wind turbines didn't work, well, then why is 60% of them working good, right? Then it's a logical stupidity. And this is the problem with some policy that isn't always fun, right? Like political talking heads, and sometimes I'm a talking head. I know you are, and we agree on things, and so it's easy. But political talking heads sometimes think that they know things about stuff that they don't know. And the electric grid...
No, you don't say.
It took me years to become an expert, if I could dare call myself at that, right? So, but I mean, for someone who's like, well, I write a column for CNN and therefore I can assure you it wasn't wind, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Just plain and simple, admit it. I will be the first to admit right here on your podcast, it's not the first time, I've admitted it multiple times, fossil fuels have drawbacks. They're not perfect. I wish they were. But we don't live in a perfect world. They are better, I will always argue, than renewables. They are cheaper, they are safer, they are more reliable, but they're not perfect. But we have these morons out there who are like, wind and solar are perfect. They have no drawbacks. Well, then I can't talk to you. You're an intellectual child. I can't talk to you.
But the global warming debate has so many of those weird escape hatches that just end with you don't know what you're talking about. If you say, well, this doesn't really look like global warming, they'll say, it's climate change. And they say, yeah, but this happened in 2011. This has happened before. They've gone through this before. They'll say weather isn't climate, but then But then if there's a weather event, they'll say, see, this is climate change. And
Yeah.
it always seems to work in their benefit. One of my favorite examples ever, I was in a bar that's now gone in Georgetown I used to work at, Old Glory, and I'm looking at the television during that terrible tsunami that hit Japan, that hit the nuclear reactor and went to the place. And we're watching it live from a helicopter. It's really terrible. And the broadcaster says, and of course, we'll be seeing more and more of this as global warming continues to accelerate. And I thought, it's a freaking earthquake.
Yeah, exactly.
What are you talking about? No one questioned it. Everyone said, yes, of course. I think he had a British accent, so you had to believe him. I mean,
every time there's a storm on the Atlantic coast of Florida, people say this is an unprecedented hurricane. And you want to say, if you look at a map of Florida and that little scoop around Georgia and the Carolinas, that little scoop was caused by millions of years of hurricanes. That's the path it makes. That is why the coastline is shaped like that. They're like, we've never seen a storm this bad. You're lying.
I mean, reporters,
you're just lying.
In politics and in everything, I generally think that reporters should be barred from using the word unprecedented.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, this is Old Testament. There is nothing new under the sun.
No.
There is nothing that is unprecedented. And most reporters are kind of stupid. So, like, really stupid. They're just good at it. And they'll say this stuff all the time, as if you have no memory at all of anything that's come before just that exact moment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing that this is not blamed on Donald Trump, honestly.
Well, I'm surprised it's not. Everything else is. But I mean, going back to Texas and what makes it worse about the wind, because I'm not opposed to wind and solar. And you said you saw lots of wind turbines when you were there. And where they work, let's use them. But let's not pretend that the wind always blows or the sun always shines, right?
West Texas, that's one of the only places that wind turbines really make sense, because the wind always does blow in West Texas.
It blows a lot, but when it has a problem, you need a backup. They took 3 coal plants offline. I would like to know why. Certain green groups, the people who I battle nonstop, the people who I think really are the devil incarnate, I think some of these groups are just truly evil people funded by evil men. They applauded when the latest coal plant in Titus County, Texas, it closed in 2017. Bunch of people lost their jobs. We, Power the Future, reported on it when it closed because we said this is tragic, right? These guys are all losing their jobs, and Michael Bloomberg is out there clapping, saying, we closed another one, boys. Well, you know what? That coal mine put out 1,800 megawatts of power on a daily basis. 1,800 megawatts of power would have done an awful lot to stabilize the grid. That's about a third of the electricity that was lost from the wind turbines. Imagine if that coal plant just hadn't been taken offline, right? But it's not enough just to say we're going to transition to wind. It's like, no, and we have to eliminate what is working. And I just tweeted this earlier, and it got me thinking about just the left in general. They are so firm believers in their position that they have to eliminate options, right? Green is so good, we have to destroy the others. Just like Medicaid for all is so good, we have to get rid of your private health insurance. Just like public schools are so good, we have to eliminate the option of having school choice, right? They don't want you to have choice. When you're a statist, options are not a possibility. And if green was so good, let's have it compete in the free market. No, you got to get rid of those coal plants. They did. Michael Bloomberg clapped. Sierra Club sent out a press release. And there are about 40 people dead in Texas. And none of them are going to cry a drop. These are necessary casualties in the war on climate change. Just ask Bill Gates. He told everyone on 60 Minutes on Sunday, right? There's going to be some sacrifices. It's not their family who's dead, so what do they care?
No, exactly. He'll still hop into his jet. So with coal seems like something, along with nuclear, that is really perfectly suited for this kind of weather. Because if you're running a coal plant, you've got stockpiles of coal. You can burn that energy, you can create energy, and you can transmit it out. If you're running a natural gas plant, then you need natural gas coming in. You need trucks on your roads, or a pipeline or some other access to it. And when the roads are shut down, as they are in huge amounts of Texas right now, at least you're unable to drive on them, you can't get that. I mean, if these coal plants were still in existence, would Texas be dealing with this? Or is there still the problem of just down power lines and aspects of your grid are going to go out?
I mean, there is still going to be problems in a storm like this, but would the situation have been a lot better? Absolutely. It's undeniable. And proof of the fact that it's undeniable is, again, 2011. Now, the electric grid, right, the way it works, just nerdy for a second, there's no like 70% capacity, right? Like I think I compared it to your cell phone. Like, well, I have 3 bars, the signal's kind of crappy, but I can still make a call. The grid is on or the grid is off. When the grid is reduced capacity, what they have to do is they have to strategically shut down sections. Imagine your stove. You got a 6-burner stove. The amount of gas coming in for some reason is diminished. Well, you don't run 4 of them a little, you run 3 of them great, right? But if you're that 4th community, your power got turned off. That's why some people in Texas had power, some people didn't. They have to keep the grid stable. And so they can't just reduce the amount of electricity, they have to cut people off completely. Right?
If you're on like an energy corridor, like our friend Brian Stobie or somebody else, like some of the guys we've been talking to in Dallas, then you're going to be right now. You still got power. Dallas is okay.
Yeah.
If you're in Austin or if you're in Lubbock, where 2 of our staff are, it's not okay. You haven't had power or intermittently, or you don't know when it's going to come back. And we're sitting there Monday morning at our meeting, and people are saying, "I might drop off this call. I don't know how much longer this is going on, and I've got a family to worry about and people to take care of." Texas has an interesting grid because it's not all interconnected. And I know Texas is massive. I just drove through it. It's incredibly massive. But could you explain some of these intricacies about the Texas grid? Because you see talking heads mention it on the news, and they don't really go into detail. And sometimes at the end of that segment, I say, well, I'm not really exactly sure what the problem was there.
They make such a big deal out of this, and it's just absolute nonsense that most of Texas is not connected to the rest of the national grid, right? Even if it were connected to the national grid, would this have saved them? Probably not, right? The amount of outages were massive. And we're talking about Texas. Lots of states had outages. There were outages in Kansas. There were outages in Nebraska, right? So this was not just isolated to Texas. The problem in Texas, again, is that these other states have a better energy mix. Texas has 75% fossil fuels and nuclear and 25% wind. And when that 25% was taken offline, they could not keep up with the demand. So this, again, we're trying to find someone to blame. This is AOC saying the fault is that we don't have a Green New Deal. People are blaming climate change. People are blaming Governor Abbott. They're blaming, it's not one particular problem, and it's certainly not the fact that Texas has an independent grid. The problem is how you produce electricity, and they took a huge chunk of it off, again, because the windmills froze. I'm not opposed to wind turbines. I'm not opposed to wind energy, but boy, they don't work. And look at and this is one example, right? So the Texas storm, terrible. Puerto Rico, Hurricane Maria, the wind turbines were wiped out. They found out the hard way that a Category 5 storm versus a wind turbine, storm wins, right? So your whole island is running on wind power, and you're proud of that fact. What happens when the wind turbine's not down? No politician in Puerto Rico thought, what the hell happens if a hurricane comes through here? Right?
No, Puerto Rico never gets hurricanes until global warming.
So it sat in the dark for a lot longer than necessary. And that's why when you said at the beginning what caused this, bad political decisions. There is this growing green movement, and you see this is the power of the left. It's the same as the anti-race movement. It's the same as the cancel culture. It's the same as the transgender movement. There is a strong leftist movement to say we have to shove green energy down America's throats. And people are buying it. Republicans are buying into it. Yes, we should have a big percentage of our electric grid come from wind. When it works, great. But what happens if it doesn't work? And you know what? And this is where I get angry. That is your job as the elected official. That you are the friggin' adult in the room. And your job is to think of all of these black swan events and all of these anomalies. And that is your job. But instead, you've got the Michael Bloombergs, the Tom Steyers, the George Soroses, the Sierra Clubs, the League of Conservation Voters, who spend tens of millions of dollars to elect people all to push a green agenda. Well, this is what happens when adults don't make decisions believing in science, right? But they follow this stupid agenda. It's tragic.
Is there anything behind what Congressman Ocasio-Cortez is claiming here? Has she fleshed this out at all, or is she just sitting in Washington, D.C., whipping ice balls at the people of Texas? I've only seen her tweets so far, just blasting out things that don't make sense. on their face. It's like just like you said, if wind turbines aren't working and it doesn't matter, then why does it matter if they're working? Like why would this possibly be a green energy thing? But I assume there's some people who are smarter than her. I know there's very few people who are smarter than Representative Ocasio-Cortez, but what are those people saying, the green energy advocates, for why this is not a case study in their failure?
Well, they're going to always point to it's precisely because of climate change that we're in the situation that we're in, and that's why we need more wind turbines and winds. It's cowbell, you know. It really is more cowbell, and so and the joys of the climate change agenda, climate chaos agenda, is that everything proves it. Wind, no wind. Rain, no rain. Heat, snow, ice. Doesn't matter what the hell happens. It's climate change. And I would love to know, ask an old person, ask someone in their 80s what a normal weather is like. There's no such thing as normal weather, right? So if our standard deviation is this big of a space, well, then everything is going to prove climate change. And so that would be their argument, right? Climate change is so deadly that we need to go into green turbine. We need to go into green energy. I can't find anyone who's dead from climate change. I can point to 40 some odd people right now in Texas who are dead. And that's the biggest difference. It's always these generalities. Millions are dying from climate change. We are all, even crap that I hear about unrelated things like fracking. Whole communities are being poisoned because of fracking. Can I see one? Just show me one. Show me one kid who is coughing up a storm from fracking, because damn well if they found that kid, CNN would be there every day and he would be the poster child of but they can't. So they just say whole communities are being poisoned by fracking. And wow, whole communities, isn't that scary? All they have is the ethereal. They have no concrete evidence of any of this crap. And if Republicans buy it,
and they do,
we're doomed. We're
Republicans do.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing worse than Republicans are Democrats, as far as I can tell. But it's sometimes it seems like it's pretty close. Now I know that Texas right now at the moment is really focused on just getting by day to day, taking care of their elderly, taking care of their vulnerable, taking care of their infants, taking care of those who can't take care of themselves. That's going to be full-time work for them for a week, and then counting the damage that these policies have done. What kind of appetite or what kind of even possibility is there for an event like this to actually see some pushback? I mean, we've seen some rollbacks in green energy before. In Germany, for example, which isn't always on the right path, we saw a pushback against green energy after some of their mandates just shot out, and it ended up killing a huge amount of elderly in heat waves.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's any chance for this? And has anyone actually been focusing on this in Texas? How can we make sure this doesn't happen again? I know snowplows, but how else do we make sure this doesn't happen again?
Well, it's a great question. And this is the time that, people will use it strategically for their campaigns, whatever. But this is a time to talk about it on the state and local level and say, what is the plan to make sure this doesn't happen again? Why did we take those 3 coal plants offline? How do we have them, even if you don't want to use them on a daily basis, because you do get enough wind out of West Texas, we need to have them at the ready for when this storm happens, right? People who have the luxury of a backup generator have it for that reason. It is your job as the governor, it is your job as an elected official to have these contingency plans. So you're right. This is an opportunity to say, I'm not opposed to wind and solar. I think where they work and when they work, they of course should be part of the energy mix. But let's not pretend they don't have drawbacks. And one of the drawbacks is weather. You know what worked the best the whole time of the storm? Coal, because coal always works, right? I mentioned this again in the Federalist op-ed at thefederalist.com. I ended it with this. China is building right now more coal plants. Right now, they are building more coal plants than the rest of Europe has combined. Why are they building coal plants? Because it works, because they are serious. They have a world to conquer. They have Uyghurs to put in concentration camps. They have they have people to conquer, right? They are serious people, and they look at climate change. Now, I'm not saying we want to be the Chinese, but I'm saying let's be serious about energy. What works is coal. What works is fossil fuels. Let's play with the alternatives, but let's not pretend they're perfect. And when the
And
AOCs and the Bernie Sanders tell you they are lying to you.
and what China's also doing is they're manufacturing huge amounts of wind turbines, and they sell them to us. And they sell them to Europe, and they let Europe's
70%.
energy costs go up. They make a profit selling the wind turbines, and then they make a profit because their products are cheaper because our products cost more because, for many reasons, but one of them is higher energy costs than China
this
has
is
to deal
where
with.
I can spiral into lunacy, and everyone can about their pet project, right? But Tom Steyer, one of the biggest green donors, a former presidential candidate, he made billions of dollars off of Indonesian and Chinese coal companies. Now he'll be damned if we have a coal mine in America, right? He's trying his hardest to get rid of coal miners in West Virginia. He thinks it has to be abandoned. But he will gladly let a 9-year-old girl in Western China work in a coal mine where there's no OSHA and there's no, workers' rights and there's no union, and he doesn't care. He's making money. So how come we put this guy on a stage and we say, well, what does Tom Steyer think about the environment? Tom Steyer is evil, as far as I'm concerned. Let's just call it what it is, right? So I can go crazy when it comes to this green stuff to say, they have real drawbacks. Let's not pretend they are. When people are trying to sell them on you, great, so we're not going to buy coal from West Virginia anymore. We're going to buy wind turbines from China. Is that good? Right?
No, I don't think it's actually helping children. It's not protecting us from asthma. It's not doing any of the things that they said. Now, we've just seen a war on coal since President Barack Obama openly declared it. They've made coal very, very, very expensive over the years, made it something that's difficult. I mean, are these coal plants that have been shut down in Texas, were those simply political decisions, or were those put out of business by politics?
Absolutely. Put out of business by politics and political pressure, right? If you go to the Sierra Club, who is one of the most evil organizations out there, had great roots, right? But it's turned into the devil. Their coal Beyond Coal campaign is called. Bloomberg has given them, I think it's close to $700 million at this point. Must be nice. You can donate to Power the Future, powerthefuture.com if you have $700 million. He's given them hundreds of millions of dollars. They have an actual map with the crosshairs. I thought we weren't allowed to use crosshairs after the whole Sarah Palin thing, but I guess you're allowed to. And they have crosshairs on all of the coal mines left in America, with the goal of getting rid of every single one of them. The jobs, they don't care about. The damage to the electric grid, not their problem. They want to get rid of coal. Why? Just what is your real agenda here? Climate change. No, it's not.
There's some other money to be made here. Yeah. Now, what went wrong with the wind turbines here in Texas? I mean, West Texas, like I said, doesn't stop having wind. It seems to me one of the few places that kind of makes sense to actually have windmills because it's always windy in Western Texas. Yeah. But what went wrong? These are huge machines. Some people don't realize this until you're up next to them. These turbines are so heavy and so big that they destroy themselves over years just by spinning. I mean, when they swing down, which is not for very long, they get longer at the bottom and they compact when they go back up. I mean, these are massive pieces of machinery. Did they just stop because they got cold? What's going on here?
It looks like it was literally just freezing rain, and they just froze up. I mean, Texas had some. Yeah, it looks that. Again, I wasn't there. I haven't investigated, but
you can't get there.
The funny thing about the wind turbines, though, and this is where I just have to laugh at them. They do have a 10-year lifespan, like you said, right? 70% of them are manufactured in China. To anchor them in the ground, right? You can't have these things
10 years for made in China is not terrible.
They have to get anchored to the ground. So we have to dig a hole with fossil fuel moving equipment. And we have about 2,000 pounds of rebar and cement. Well, rebar is forged by coal and cement is created by heating coal. So you dig this hole with fossil fuel equipment, so you fill it all with coal products, you put up this wind turbine, which has about 80 tons of steel and plastic fossil fuels. If we can use all these fossil fuels for a wind turbine, why can't we use these fossil fuels for electricity? No one can answer that to me, right?
You know, when we were driving down toward Austin, there's a huge part of Texas, and it's not very well populated. And you're outside of these wind turbine areas, you'll see the dumping grounds, you'll see the graveyards. You see where these propellers are laying out just to rust. I mean, what do you do with them? Shoot them into the sun?
They can't be recycled. No, yeah, they cannot be recycled like lithium-ion batteries, right? They can't be recycled, and they have about a 10-year lifespan. So again, I am not opposed to any of these technologies. I think they're fascinating. I think we're going to get better at them. Of course we are, right? We're Americans. We always progress. But they have real drawbacks. And one of the drawbacks is, well, lots of them that I've just mentioned. So let's talk about that, right? Let's also talk about the cost of green. Europe pays 4 and 5 times what we do. We have similar housing. I think you also like run totally on HVAC for even heating as I do. I wish I had, I'm way off the grid, you know, where I live. I don't have any gas hookup. So I got to heat this place with electricity. My electricity bill is high every month, especially these last couple of months. $250. It's a kick in the teeth, no doubt. Germany pays 4 and 5 times what we do for electricity because they're green, right? Do Americans know that going green is going to drive up their prices? As Texas moved to 25% renewable, did their bills come down 25%? No, they went up about 35%. Why? Let's talk about this and say we're going to go green. It's going to cost you. But we don't have these adult conversations. Instead, we say, you don't believe in science. Millions are going to die from climate change. And that ends the conversation. Yeah, exactly. And that ends the conversation.
You need to tithe if you really believe. You need to show your devotion to the faith. Now, I know that you're very busy because you're very much in demand right now because of the information you just shared with us. And you have a hard stop time. So we have to wrap up earlier than I would otherwise like to, given how interesting this is. But Daniel Turner, tell us how people can find you online and how they can find your organization if they're interested in trying to get your message out further and just follow you and listen to you.
Yeah, thank you. It's powerofthefuture.com, and I am clearly active on social media, and I write a lot. And I would love to come back. I'd love to come back with a list of questions from people who disagree with me and have a conversation. And I've said this a million times, and this is what I like about this podcast very much. We are so hostile about our beliefs and about politics that we're unable to sit down like the good old Crossfire days. We're unable to sit down with people who differ with us and have an adult conversation. I would genuinely love to sit down with AOC or Bernie Sanders or Tom Steyer and talk about these things. But none of them would ever come near me. They wouldn't, right? Because that's just how we are as a culture. And it's terrible. But if you have people listening to this podcast who are like, that dude is so wrong and I can prove it, Daniel at powerofthefuture.com. I want to engage with you. I bet you I could probably learn a lot from them. But don't just text me and tell me, you're bald, you're an idiot, I hate you. Tell me something. I hate
like
myself.
Your haircut.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, Daniel, thank you for joining us today. This has been a great edition of the Federalist Radio Hour. Thanks. And until next time, be lovers of freedom and anxious for the fray.